So continuing where I left off, right, the appellate courts, the U.S. Court of Appeals, the 12 judicial circuit courts, they're basically hearing arguments that typically last no more than a couple hours from each lawyer's side, basically the defendant saying, we believe that the lower district court did not take into consideration the precedent established in this case, in this case, in this case, and they denied my client the right to X. And the government lawyers would basically proceed and make the case that they did properly try the case. Um, Now, you can see in that picture on the bottom right that that is a very different looking courtroom than what you typically see on, like, again, a Law and Order or maybe a district courtroom. Appellate courts are different. They lack original jurisdiction. And you would typically present your argument as a lawyer in front of a 3 to 6 judge panel. Um, these Each of the 12 circuit courts, they have anywhere between 6 and 28 judgeships on each one, depending on the size of the circuit court and how many cases come through. You'll see the map in a second, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is California and Oregon and Washington, is significantly larger because they hear a ton more cases. Same thing with the circuit courts, including New York, which hears most of the financial crimes and federal financial prosecutions. But each circuit court has between 6 and 28 judges for a total of 179 judges that sit on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, outside of Supreme Court justices, to be a judge on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals is a big deal. So big, in fact, that they are appointed by the president, just like a district court judge is, actually, but they're higher. They're appointed by the president and confirmed by the who? Correct, the Senate. Bonus points if you can include the Senate Judiciary Committee in there as well, appointed by the president. Their nomination would be reviewed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then if they are voted out of committee, then they would go to the floor of the Senate for a full up and down vote from the 100 senators. And if a majority of senators say yes, then you have a judgeship for life. Like we see in the bottom right-hand corner, the cases are usually heard by rotating panels of 3. But if it's a really important hearing, like, the appeal whether, the Affordable Care Act was legit, or, in Bush v. Gore, when you're talking about whether the federal election of George W. Bush was legit or not. Really important hearings would be heard by the entire panel of judges, because most of the judges on the circuit court would say, well, I want to sit on this one, and they would say, well, I do too, and I do too, and I do too, and I do too, and that would be a different decision. Decisions reached by circuit courts are decided by majority vote, which is why there tends to be an odd number of people hearing the case. In a panel of 3, 2 votes will yield your result. Now, there is the 12th Circuit Court of Appeals, and I think maybe I should have shown you the map beforehand. Would show you the map if this was real school, and I could show you as I'm talking. But the 12th Circuit Court of Appeals has a very small territory. They only cover D.C. But even as they only cover D.C., they actually are probably the most powerful Court of Appeals in the country. And in fact, judges on the 12th Circuit Court of Appeals have a fast track for open Supreme Court seats. Because the 12th Circuit Court, even though it only covers D.C., ends up hearing all of the cases that are reviewing or enforcing the actions of all the hundreds and hundreds of bureaucratic agencies' orders in Washington. So, again, if the FAA or the SEC or the FCC or the EPA get sued, they're going to go into the district court, but then immediately be heard by the 12th Circuit Court of Appeal. And then, like I said, that's why, because of the scope of work that they do, and because their decisions and the opinions they write become, real landmark cases that help decide cases all over the country, they're arguably the most powerful of it all. So here's the map I've been referring to for a while. You can see Colorado is in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. with Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Um, Looking at the eastern United States, you can see the circuit courts of appeals are smaller. That tends to be because of population totals. Certain circuit courts have the reputation for hearing certain types of cases. Um, as we look here and let's take the Second Circuit Court with New York. Again, that's going to hear a lot of financial crimes and major banks and Wall Street and things like that. And so looking at these, some tend to tilt in more liberal directions, some tend to tilt in more conservative directions. But these, again, are the important boundaries for the 12 circuit courts of appeal. Any case in Colorado District Court tried in Denver would be appealed to the appellate court, the 10th appellate court, also in Denver, I believe. But any case in Kansas tried in the district court that's appealed would be heard in Denver as well. Okay, so moving on, we've talked about the federal district courts. We've talked about the U.S. courts of appeal, all 12 of them. Let's now talk about the Supreme Court, sometimes affectionately referred to as the Supremes. The Supreme Court is, like I said, the only court system mandated by the Constitution, and they sit at the top of the federal court system. There are 9 members total, although that is not written into the Constitution, is more tradition. In fact, there had been discussion with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the replacing of Trump of Ginsburg there at the end with Amy Coney Barrett. There was talk that maybe Democrats would seek to expand the numbers of the court and add a 10th, 11th, and 12th to put more liberal justices on the court. I don't believe that that's going to happen. It's been 9 for a very long time, but it could happen. Democrats could change the number of judges on the court if they felt like, they've gotten a raw deal lately. And I think there's an argument to be made for that, right? Obama wasn't able to fill the seat of Antonin Scalia, this man right here, who died in Obama's final term. Yet Trump was able to fill the seat of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died in his final term. So, I think Democrats would argue that they've, been robbed and that they could add a couple more seats. Now, out of the 9 members total, 8 of the members of the Supreme Court are considered to be associate justices, still very, very powerful, and 1 judge or justice on the court is considered to be the Chief Justice. Like I said, the number 9 has been stable for a long time, but it doesn't have to be. And in fact, the numbers fluctuated pretty early with 3, 4, 5, 6, and up and down until President Ulysses S. Grant came and kind of stabilized that 9. Now, what's really important about the Supreme Court, and in previous years I have us watch a documentary, but there's not time for that, that the Supreme Court, unlike the district courts or unlike the U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeal, they have 100% carte blanche. Okay, maybe I'll nuance that. For the vast majority of cases, they get to decide which cases they will hear. So the Supreme Court can basically refuse to take a case because they don't want to. And in fact, the only thing that is needed for a case to be heard in front of the U.S. Supreme Court is for 4 of the 9 justices to say, we want to hear this case. Now, this is really important because the justices on the Supreme Court, aside from being the most powerful judges in the country, they have a staff made up of probably a dozen to 15 law clerks, whose job it is to review the thousands of cases that get appealed to the Supreme Court each year, to reveal the case findings, to reveal what the lower courts have decided, to review the major issues. And then, their clerks will say, Justice Kavanaugh or Justice Kagan or Justice Sotomayor, we think you might want to review this case, and they would present that case to Justice Sonia Sotomayor, and she would say, you're absolutely right, I want to hear this case. And as long as 4 justices agree, then the Supreme Court takes that. And so I think this fact that justices get to choose what cases they hear has a lot to do with what they see and what America has come to see and what their constitutional federal role is. Since Marbury v. Madison, the case that you hopefully remember from U.S. history, their essential role established in that precedent that brought on judicial review is to decide the constitutionality of cases, right? They are simply hearing an argument made by two different, an attorney for each of the litigants' side on a previously decided case. Most of their work is done under the appellate jurisdiction, and so they are basically looking and say, was this decision reached with the backing of the Constitution? Right? They're looking at the words of the Constitution in order to decide, right, is this decision reached by the lower district court, by the Circuit Court of Appeal, is that actually what the Constitution means? Is that actually, allowable? And so they decide constitutionality of cases. They also they're the kind of the go-to when there is a conflict between the states. Now, if you want to maybe make it much more likely that the Supreme Court will choose to hear a case, basically anytime there is a lack of uniformity in the interpretation of law. So, for example, if the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals hears a case on gay marriage and says, yes, it's allowed, and then the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals hears it and says no, well, the Supreme Court would immediately catch wind of that basically and say, well, we have a massive difference in interpretation of the laws and of the Constitution here, and it is up to us as the top of the federal court system, the supreme, court system in America. We need to basically reach a consensus here and decide what is supposed to be. And so moving on, we're going to look a lot at the Supreme Court specifically because while, they hear only a fraction of the cases in our country, they hear the biggest ones. And it's their decisions that ultimately guide our country. It was their decision in Brown v. Board of Education that overturned the principle of separate but equal and, brought about the end of segregation. It was their decision in Miranda v. Arizona that guaranteed, defendants' rights even when they didn't know that they had them. It was their decision in Gibbons v. Ogden that basically said the federal government has and Congress has the power to write laws regulating the economy, which gave rise to most of the entire bureaucratic system. We could list big giant case after big giant case, but at the end of the day, we need to talk a lot more about them because they're just very, very important. Now, one thing I will say is, and we'll read some articles on this, but the Supreme Court typically takes its role very seriously. Because these judges serve for life and because they're generally some of the top judges in their field, they get on the court and they actually are very collegial. Even, and famously, Antonin Scalia, one of the conservative justices on the court, one of the most conservative justices of all time, had a famous long-running friendship with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? That she's in the bottom right-hand picture of this corner of this picture is little Jewish woman who was kind of a hallmark for liberalism and very progressive. But they got on the case and there's a lot of respect. They meet together and sit around tables and kind of review, do we want to take this case? Do we not? And they take their roles and their jobs very seriously. Supreme Court, like I said, they might be really inclined to take a case if there's a lack of uniformity in different decisions, if there's conflict between states. But they might also decide to pass on a case that basically they consider to be too politically charged, right? For a long time, the Supreme Court didn't take gun control cases or didn't take, has been loath to take up abortion issues because it's too political. And they worry that if they become too entrenched in the polarization and politicalness of our country, that they can't do their job of applying the Constitution. They are a kind of separate, standalone beast in the U.S. federal system.